Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be tier ranking every fantasy romance book I've read this year. Alright guys, it has been quite a while since I filmed a tier rank video, and they are some of my favorite videos to film. So I read 17 fantasy romance books so far this year, and in this video I'm going to be giving a very brief, spoiler-free plot synopsis of every book, and then I will be tier ranking them and we can see how they fall. So I'll explain the different tiers once we get into that section, but hopefully this video will be able to give you guys some new fantasy romance recommendations, and I just love tier rank videos, so this should be really fun. Now, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's get into the tier rank. Alright guys, so welcome to the tier rank. Like I said, I have 17 fantasy romance books to rank. So the tiers are perfection. I love everything about this book. Like, it is a 5-star read. I will reread it, recommend it to everyone, and I just loved it. Then we have great. So typically these are books that I personally would rate 5 stars, but I know that not everybody is gonna love them quite as much as me, but I still think they are absolutely amazing reads. Then we have okay. So this is like my middle ground where this book was okay. It wasn't a standout, but I had a really fun time while I was reading it, and I'll still probably recommend it. Then we have a not for me. So this is a book that I either picked up because other people recommended it, or I know that it's very beloved, and I just didn't enjoy it. So it's not for me, but I understand the appeal. Then we have nope. I don't like this book, I didn't enjoy this book, didn't have a fun time, and wouldn't recommend it. So with that being said, let's jump into the first book. So first up, we have White Horse, Black Knights. I love this fantasy romance. It is so unique. We are following this girl, and in this world, you are born with a scar that can designate you as having like some sort of magical ability. So our main character was born with this, and she's able to talk to animals, which is such a cool ability. However, she is currently being held in this convent and is pretty much being abused. That is until this noble decides that he wants to marry her. However, the caveat to this is he is going to make her travel 21 days, completely nude, on horseback to his kingdom to honor the gods. And her only company is going to be a soldier who also has a godlike ability, one of his powers being able to smell virginity, which I still don't know how I feel about that. But anyway, it's their romance, and it was really good. I am going to put this with great. I enjoyed this. It wasn't quite a 5-star, but it was like right on the border. Just because I didn't feel as emotionally connected to the characters as like my 5-star reads, but overall, it was really good. Highly recommend. Audiobook was also really good. All right, next up is Curse of the Thorn King. This is by Lisette Marshall. She also wrote the Court of Blood Binding series, which is phenomenal. It is such a good series. So over on my Patreon, this was picked as the book. And unfortunately, I got sick when we were supposed to have our live show, but I did really enjoy this. I will say now that it's been a while, at least a month since I've read it, I do think I'm going to put it with okay, only because it's not quite a standout read. I actually forgot a lot that happens. We're following this girl who decides that because of circumstances, she has to kill the Fae King. However, when she gets there to kill the Fae King, she finds out that the Fae King has the ability to, whenever he tells her a command, she has to do it. So his voice is essentially his power. So it's very hard to kill someone who can tell you to stop trying to kill them, and you have to stop. So Beauty and the Beast retelling, it ended up being really good, but I've read a few that were more, I don't know, I just keep thinking of like Entreat Me by Grace Draven and books like that where I really felt connected, and because this book was so short, I wasn't as connected with the characters, but still very good read. Next up is Crown of Midnight. This is my least favorite book in the Throne of Glass series. You know what, actually, let's go in order so this makes a little bit more sense. So first up we have Throne of Glass. if you are not part of my Patreon, or if you're just not familiar, over on my Patreon, we are doing a Throne of Glass read-along where we are reading all of the books in the Throne of Glass series and having a live show at the end of the month, just discussing the books. So, first up was Throne of Glass, and I liked it. So when I first read the Throne of Glass series, I almost DNF'd at book 1 because the main character is very, very full of herself, and it was YA. Like, the original series was marketed as YA, and it just has a younger tone. However, as you progress through the series, it becomes much more new adult. The characters become a little bit less frustrating, and there's a lot of changes that go on. So the first 2 books I knew were going to be a little bit of a struggle, and they were. So I'm going to say Throne of Glass is okay. I did like it a little bit more on my reread, but still, it was a struggle. Not quite as much as Crown of Midnight. I don't remember disliking Crown of Midnight as much as I disliked Throne of Glass. I feel bad putting it at not for me, because you obviously need, I'll move it up to okay, because you need Crown of Midnight in order to progress through the series. So, like, it's very important. A lot of things go down in that book. It's just pacing, it's a lot slower paced. I was impatient to get to characters, so I think I'm going to stick with okay for that one. Next up, I want to go in order, so let's go with Spark of the Everflame. I am putting this with great. I love this series. This series is phenomenal. It has that slow burn romance. The world is well developed, and it's just everything I love in fantasy romance is in this book. So it's so good. So if you're unfamiliar with Spark of the Everflame, which is the first book in the series, we're following Diem, and Diem lives in a world where there are descended, and the descended are actually descended from gods. So they're unbelievably powerful. Now, Diem's mother is a healer, which allows her to kind of go into the descended area, which is normally not permitted by humans. Now, the humans are kind of sick of being second-class citizens, so there are certain humans that are trying to start this uprising to take down the descended, and Diem's kind of like boyfriend, friend, is one of them. So really this first book is Diem deciding where her loyalties lie. Her mother ends up going missing, and she's trying to find her mother, and she thinks the descended could help her, but also her friend has this whole rebel group backing him, and they could also be of help. So the first book, while I did enjoy it, was not as good as Glow of the Flame. Glow of the Everflame being the second book in the series, one of my favorite books so far this year, and it really just expands on the relationship between Diem and the characters we meet, and like I said, slow burn romance, and I loved it so much. So that is a book I will hear no criticism on. So that is definitely going in perfection. I have had some friends start the series and say that they didn't understand the hype because of Spark. And I will say Spark is a lot slower paced, and honestly, you have to get through Spark in order just to experience Glow. And I am so excited for Heat of the Everflame, which will be releasing in May. So the same month that I am filming this video. I've heard mixed things about Heat of the Everflame. It's also incredibly long, but I'm very excited to pick it up. All right, so next up we have Feathers So Vicious. This is a dark fantasy romance. It's by Liv Zander, who is the same author that wrote the King of Flesh and Bone duology, which is like one of the darkest fantasy romances I've ever read. That's the fantasy romance where the guy or like the love interest ends up breaking the main girl's legs twice and never really apologizes. He's just like, if you hadn't tried to run away, I wouldn't have had to break your legs. So I kind of knew going into it that this might be hit or miss. Anyway, I ended up really liking it. We're following this girl that lives in a world where there are these magical beings known as ravens, and they are hated by society. So our main character ends up being kidnapped by 2 ravens in the hopes that they'll be able to trade her for a raven that her family has captured. And it's kind of their romance. And one of the ravens is kind of like a psychopath. Like, he's really big on torture in the bedroom. And the other raven is more golden retriever. And I'm not sure if this is going to be a love triangle or why choose, because I have not read the second book yet. However, I did really enjoy this first one, so I will be moving on and reading the second one soon. So I think I'm going to put it is so between okay and great because it was dark. And there's a scene in the beginning of this book with a little kid and a rave. It was messed up. I might put it with great though. I'm going to put it in great. That is liable to change. Okay, so next up is the roller coaster of the book. How does it feel? Or yes, how does it feel? This book, first of all, I knew nothing about it going into it. I randomly saw it at Barnes & Noble and gave it a try. Then as I was reading it, I had so many people messaging me being like, oh my God, I heard this book is insane. Oh my gosh, I heard this book is wild. And I understand because this book is unhinged. However, it was so fun and I have never been so caught off guard by an ending in a book. It literally might be the only time I've ever felt so completely like, I can't believe this. So I am going to actually put this in great because I know there are people out there that are not going to enjoy this book and that is totally valid. However, it's such a fun time with it. And the ending is amazing. So this is following a girl that when she was really young, she believed she saw a fairy. And because of this, she's kind of become obsessed with winged creatures. So she is trying, now that she's an adult, trying to research this moth that is going extinct, and she knows that this moth is attracted to a type of mushroom. So while she is searching for the mushroom, she ends up in the Unseelie Court. And when she gets there, she's almost killed many times by the prince of the Unseelie Court, who decides right away that he has instant dislike of this girl and wants to kill her. However, he slowly starts to change his mind, and it's kind of their romance. But at one point, he puts her in a dungeon with a monster that gets off on some really weird stuff, and he looks like a tree. And it was so odd to listen to I listened to the audiobook, and at one point I was like, do I want to continue? Because, this is weird. But it was very reminiscent of Fortuna Sworn. If any of you have read that book, very similar tone. Story isn't very similar, but, as far as kind of my overall feelings and the vibe of the book, definitely has Fortuna Sworn vibes. But yeah, so I'm going to put it with great, because I'm definitely reading the sequel, and I liked it. It was fun. After that, we have Heartless Hunter, which I just finished 2 days before filming this video. And I'm conflicted on this. So there are people out there that are going to love this book. I know a lot of my friends have loved this book, and I understand it has a really good romance without being spicy, a little bit of a love triangle. However, it just wasn't a standout for me. I'm going to put it with okay, because I did like it. I gave it 3.75 stars. It's following this girl, Rune, I think? Rue or Rune. Anyway, she's a witch, and when in her community, at one point, witches were the ruling class. There were 3 witches. However, these witches were assassinated, and now humans rule, and they actually hunt witches. So Rune is trying to stay under the radar, but she's also kind of a vigilante and is saving whatever witches she can. Now, her best friend kind of is friend zone, and he really, really likes her, and he knows she's a witch, but he still loves her anyway, and tries to keep her safe, which is very hard to do considering his older brother is one of the most notorious witch hunters in this area. So Rune decides she needs to get information, and she is going to fake date Gideon, her best friend's brother. Well, Gideon is actually onto Rune and suspects her of being the Crimson Moth, so he is going to fake date her for information, and the story goes from there. My biggest critique with this is I wanted so much more from the world and the politics, because I thought it was fascinating, also the magic system, but it just wasn't quite fleshed out enough, and we spent so much time on this romance and this budding romance. I just wanted a little bit more from the world. So overall, 3.75. However, there are people out there that will adore this book. I am positive. So that's why it's in okay. Next up, we have Heir of Fire. It is going in great. I really can't go too into why I love this book. I will say, if you watch my live show on my Patreon, there is a romance that happens in this book. We're introduced to a character. He is one of my favorite characters in all of SJM's universe. I will say I forgot how horrible he is to our main character at the beginning of this book, which is why originally I said this is my favorite book in the series. I actually think Kingdom of Ash might be my favorite. But we will see as I reread the series how it changes. But anyway, definitely great. This is pretty much the start of when Tog becomes one of my favorite series. Like, this is the book where we're introduced to so many characters, and it's just, this is really where it begins. So yeah, it's gonna go in great. I really enjoyed it. Okay, this next book is gonna be controversial. So we have House of Sky and Breath. This book, oh my gosh, I want to put it in Nope so bad, and I'm going to make so many of you guys so mad at me if I do that. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I'm putting it in Nope. I just didn't like this book, and I had to read it twice, and it was worse the second time around. I think the first time I read this book, and I can't go into really anything about this because it's huge spoilers all around. If you're unfamiliar with Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood, which is the first book in this series, it is a urban fantasy. We are following Bryce Quinlan, who's a half fae, half human, living in Lunathian, and something happens and she has to solve a murder, and she ends up teaming up with Hunt Athalar, who's a fallen angel, and the story kind of goes from there. I will say Crescent City is my least favorite series in the SJM universe, so that might also play a part in why I'm rating this so low. But House of Sky and Breath in particular, the first time I read it, it took me a very long time to get through, and I ended up rating it 4 stars, and I literally think I only rated it 4 stars because of the ending. Because I had to do a recap of this book, so I read it and did a recap video, and that was one of the 2 worst filming weeks I've ever had. I just didn't care enough about the characters, and it's so slow paced, and it is just info dump after info dump after info dump, and I was not a fan. So unfortunately, I'm gonna put this on Nope. However, if you love this series, I am so happy for you, and that is why reading is subjective. Personally for me, I didn't like it, but I think it still has like a 4.5 on Goodreads. Like, people love this series. So if you're thinking about picking it up, definitely give it a shot. Everything SJM writes is amazing. So me saying it's my least favorite of her books, it's still probably pretty high in the grand scheme of things. But for this list, it's going in Nope. Because the thought of trying to reread that book is scary to me. Okay, I'm sorry. That was very negative. I try not to go so negative on my channel, but I have strong feelings about this series. All right, next up is my first Patreon book club pick, which is so cool because I started my Patreon in January, and just to be like, oh my gosh, I read this with my patrons, it's a really cool feeling. But anyway, it's Thief of Silver and Souls. It is a Why Choose fantasy romance, and I liked it. I'm gonna put this with okay, only because I haven't felt the need to pick up the second book, and it's been released on audiobook for a while. But I will say this is probably one of the Why Choose romances that the fantasy and the plot overshadowed the romance. Like, yes, she was having this budding romance with multiple people, but there was so much else going on. So if you are new to fantasy romance, if you're new to Why Choose, I feel like this might be a great book to start with, to dip your feet into and like get your feet wet with Why Choose, because there is still so much fantasy in this book, and you're trying to uncover this mystery and magic, and it's really, really well done. So if you're new to Why Choose, definitely check out Thief of Silver and Souls by Eva Chase. It does also kind of end on a bit of a cliffhanger. Know that. I feel like all of this is going to be kind of, the last 3 books in a row have been like not my fave. All right. I'm sorry. I feel like a lot of you guys are going to be kind of mad at me. I am going to put this book in Not For Me. There were parts I liked. I did enjoy it more than House and Sky and Breath. I will say that. And I think the pacing in this book was much better than House of Sky and Breath. I'm trying to do this without spoilers. I'm sorry. But I wanted more from a certain thing that was given to us at the end of the second book. I thought there was going to be a little bit more of it, and there wasn't. And there are sci-fi elements that are kind of brought in to this book, which kind of, I didn't love that change. Although it seems like we were headed there, it just felt a little jarring. However, there is a character in this book that honestly, I feel like carried this book for me. Like, whatever she did, I loved her. And this is really the first book I think this is the first book we get her POV, but like, she carried the book for me. And I will read an entire book about her and her relationship and her life. I loved her. So that is why it's actually a not for me and not nope, because there's actually a couple characters that I really enjoyed. Obviously, one of them has a infamous TikTok sound. Also loved him. But yeah, so I'll put it with not for me just because I wanted to love this book. I actually bought multiple copies of this book, and it just wasn't as good as I was hoping. Once again, my personal feelings. If you loved it, that is awesome. I'm happy you had a great experience with it. For me, I just didn't love it. Which is the exact opposite for Slaying the Vampire Conqueror. I am putting this with great, and I've had so many people tell me they thought this book was boring. I loved it so much. I thought the romance was so cool. The entire magic system of this was interesting and unique. Carissa Broadbent, slowly becoming one of my favorite authors, fantasy romance authors. But if you're unfamiliar with Slaying the Vampire Conqueror, we're following this girl who was living a really hard life, and she ends up kind of joining this like cult where she has to give up her eyesight in order to be able to see the threads of fate, which is so cool. Not cool that she had to lose her eyes, but a very cool and unique concept of viewing the world this way. So anyway, her higher-ups in this cult say they want her to partner with the vampire conqueror and then kill him because he's a vampire conqueror and he's conquering all this territory. And it is their romance, and it's really good. So highly recommend. I love this. It's between great and perfection. Like, it's right here. I'm going to keep it in great just because I didn't love it quite as much as Glow of the Everflame, but I really liked it. Okay, so next up, I hate doing this, is Tempest of Tea. Honestly, now that it's been a while since I've read this, I'm going to put this with nope, and I feel so bad doing that. But I think it's because I went in with really high expectations because I've actually been corrected. I thought the author compared this to Six of Crows, but it's not. It was actually just a bunch of blurbs and stuff said, if you're a fan of Six of Crows, you'll like this book. Six of Crows is one of my favorite heist duologies. So this was pitched as Six of Crows with vampires. Both of those things. I thought this book was going to be my new favorite read. And it was very, very character driven, but not in the way Six of Crows is. So somehow throughout this book, I just didn't feel as connected with the characters. And it was just very, very slow paced. The ending didn't make a lot of sense to me. And I honestly forget 80% of this book. So Tempest of Tea, unfortunately, didn't work for me. And I'm really sad about that. Because like I said, I really wanted to love it. I would still give it a try. I know I've had 2 friends read it, one of them DNF'd, and the other one did enjoy it, and I think rated it 3.5 stars. So try it out if it sounds interesting to you. I just didn't love it. Okay, down to the last 2. So, A Fate Inked in Blood. This book, I don't know. This is kind of controversial because I loved it. I'm putting it in great. We're following this girl who is also in a loveless marriage. And in this world, some people have been blessed by the gods. They have like a drop of god blood, which gives them powers. So she's in a loveless marriage because her husband has a power that can help her village, and she has to be nice to him, but she hates her husband, essentially. So her husband ends up being a terrible person and puts her in a situation where she has to fight to the death against this guy who is known as having a drop of, I believe, like warrior blood. And he's also just a really good fighter, and he has a fire axe, and she stands no chance. And then it turns out that she actually has been hiding this magical ability herself. So the first book is really just her being a pawn by all these different people that are trying to use this powerful ability she possesses, but not caring about her. And all of what I just said takes place in the first chapter. So I think that is why this book gets a little bit of hate, and I totally understand. The first chapter of this book, first like 3 chapters, are so action-packed and intense, and so much goes on. And then there's such a lull in action, and we kind of learn a little bit more about the world and like things you normally get in those earlier chapters. So I feel like the pacing was off for this book. But other than that, I mean, I love Vikings. The Last Kingdom is one of my favorite TV shows. So I ate this up. I love the world. I love the magic. I love Norse mythology. So this worked for me. I really liked it. And last up, this one. I don't know if I want to put this one. Okay, so last up is The Everking. This is a fantasy romance. And the way I like to pitch this is if you have read the Shatter Me series, Think of Aaron Warner, but make him a pirate. And that is the main guy in this. Like, he gives me such Aaron Warner vibes, except adult pirate version, and so good. This guy uses love as a threat and an endearment, and I eat it up. I loved him so much. But this is following this girl that, she lives in a very affluent family, and her family has won this war, and they forced this group of people into like another realm almost, and they don't expect this like barrier between the realms to ever break. Anyway, it ends up breaking, and the Everking comes out, and he ends up kidnapping our main character and wants to use her to get revenge on her father, and it's their romance. And it's really, really good. So this was between great and perfection. Oh, I really don't know. I think I'm gonna put it in great. I'm sorry if that's kind of boring. I know I have a lot in great. Once again, I loved it. It's just not up to Glow of the Everflame standards, but still such a good read. So yeah, overall, I would say I had a really good start to the year in terms of fantasy romance. All right, guys, that is it for my tier rank video. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of the books that I talked about and if you would rank them differently. And I would also like to say a huge thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Erin, Leslie, and Kat. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel, and thank you everyone who has watched this video. Now, I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!